Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, January 2021. A man strolls through the terminal. Slight build, dark hair, plain shirt, just another passenger, waiting for his connecting flight to Canada. He checks his phone. Armed police swarm him. This is the world's most powerful and elusive drug lord. A man whose $17 billion empire flooded the world with crystal meth. A man so rich he once lost $66 million in a single night at the casino and didn't even flinch. He built a fortune bigger than El Chapo's, yet barely anyone knew his name. There were no rap songs, no Netflix series, hardly even a photograph. For years he lived in the shadows, until now.
He wasn't big or strong or dressed fancy clothes or any of that stuff. He was very, very Mr. Normal.
For decades, the world's most dangerous drug lords were larger than life. Escobar, Gotti, El Chapo, their names known everywhere. But Tse Chi Lop, he was different. He stayed hidden. His cartel, known simply as the Company, was behind 70% of the drugs flooding Australia and Asia. Unlike the Mexican cartels, he ruled with strategy, not chaos. No turf wars, no street-level bloodbaths, just pure, silent efficiency. Until a single mistake exposed the biggest criminal empire the world had never seen. A Bronx street corner. 1992, FBI agents have a huge problem. New York streets were being flooded with cheap, high-grade heroin. Hundreds of addicts are overdosing, but no one can figure out the source.
It really is an epidemic. I mean, I just showed you in the paper. I mean, every day, I mean, we have a family Bible that's filled. We went to 14 funerals with our son's friends in 1 year. 14. All from addiction. I don't know. They're just dropping like flies.
The FBI put the corners under constant surveillance. Agents tapped phones and eventually tracked shipments back to a mysterious supplier. One name kept appearing, Tse Chi Lop. But there was almost no trace of him. Unlike the street-level gangs making the news, Tse was quiet, calculating, and very smart. He cut deals with the New York mafia but never drew attention to himself. He wasn't the violent, brash kingpin people expected of a New York mob boss. He was a slight, unassuming Chinese man, known for his bad dress sense and a center parting. But he had a rare talent. He was very, very good at smuggling heroin. That's how he thrived, until the police got too close. He fled to China, where his criminal career had begun, in a ruthless triad created by former Red Guard soldiers in the chaos of post-Mao China. Here, he was safe from the FBI's clutches, but they weren't ready to forget about him. But then he got complacent, and it all came crashing down. In 1998, he took a flight to Hong Kong. He was arrested and extradited to the U.S. Tse Chi Lop was charged with running the United States' biggest heroin trafficking operation. This was the height of the war on drugs. He should have been put away for life. But somehow, Mr. Normal wriggled free, almost. He convinced a judge that he was a good man who simply made a mistake. He had reformed his character, he claimed, and would start a small business when he got out. Mr. Normal got just 9 years. In jail, Tse built contacts and knowledge about the drug trade. By 2006, he was free, and that's when he truly became dangerous. Instead of picking up where he left off, Tse went bigger. He didn't just sell heroin anymore, he built a corporate empire for meth. A syndicate so massive and disciplined that police would later compare it to Amazon for drugs. Tse didn't crave fame. He stayed in the shadows, letting others take the heat. No flashy assassinations, no cartel wars, just quiet, methodical expansion, and it worked. By 2018, his empire was generating billions, flooding markets from Australia to Japan, and law enforcement, they had no idea where he was, until a single mistake exposed everything. But first, let's look at the huge drugs operation Tse Chi Lop built. He wasn't running things from a jungle hideout or a heavily armed compound. Instead, he moved between Hong Kong, Macau, and luxury resorts, staying under the radar, while his empire flooded the world with meth. His syndicate was like nothing law enforcement had ever seen. Unlike the violent, chaotic Mexican cartels, Tse ran his drug empire like a multinational corporation. His syndicate, the Company, or Sam Gore, operated with precision, using logistics experts, money launderers, and supply chains stretching from China to Australia. What set them apart was their guarantee. If a shipment was seized, it was replaced at no cost, making them the most reliable supplier in the underworld. And at the heart of it all, the Golden Triangle, where industrial-scale meth production fueled their billion-dollar operation. For decades, the lawless jungles of Myanmar's Shan state had been a haven for drug production. It was the perfect location, out of reach from international law enforcement, controlled by warlords and armed militias who profited from the trade. Civil wars and decades of political instability meant that as long as the right people were paid off, Tse's operations could continue without interference. Deep inside these territories, super labs the size of factories churned out meth at an industrial scale. Workers, many trafficked or forced into labor, cooked some of the purest meth in the world. The scale was unprecedented. The numbers were staggering. Producing 1 kilo of meth cost $1,800. That same kilo sold for $70,000 in Thailand, $300,000 in Australia, and nearly $600,000 in Japan. Even if 10 tons of product were lost in police seizures, one successful shipment meant millions in profit. According to the UN, Tse's meth operation was generating between $8 billion and $17.7 billion a year. That's more than many Fortune 500 companies. Law enforcement knew the scale of the problem, but what they didn't know was just how deep it ran. Tse was working with everyone from the Yakuza to Australian biker gangs and corrupt officials. He was making billions, yet he remained invisible. But thanks to one nervous drug mule, authorities had finally cracked the first layer of his operation. And the company was about to face its first major blow. It wasn't a daring police raid. It wasn't a high-level informant. The empire of Asia's most elusive drug lord began to unravel because of one nervous man in an airport. November 2016, Yangon International Airport, Myanmar. A young Taiwanese drug courier, Kai Gen-zi, is trying to stay calm as he approaches security. But officers immediately notice something's off. He's twitchy, sweating, and keeps picking at his hands. His blistered fingers aren't just from nerves, they're from handling raw meth chemicals so toxic they burn the skin. Security stops him, searches him. Taped to his thighs are 80 grams of ketamine, a small bust, normally just another trafficker. But then police check his phone and realize they've just hit the jackpot. Inside is a treasure trove of evidence. Thousands of messages, contacts, payment logs, photos of drug shipments, locations, even gang members, and then the real horror. A video file. A man is tied up sobbing, surrounded by triad enforcers. His crime? Losing a 300-kilo meth shipment at sea. The video shows his captors burning his feet with a blowtorch, electrocuting him with a cattle prod. A warning, loyalty or death. The brutality is shocking. But for investigators, there's something even more important. They recognize a face. One of the men in the phone's contacts, appearing in photos at high-level drug meetings, is someone Interpol, the DEA, and the AFP have all heard rumors about, but have never seen confirmed. Tse Chi Lop. For the first time, they have proof that one man sits at the top of it all. And now they just need to follow the trail. The hunt for Asia's El Chapo has begun. Now they had a name. But tracking Tse Chi Lop down was another challenge entirely. For years, the company thrived in the shadows. Police knew the drugs were coming in, but the mastermind behind it all remained a ghost. That was about to change. The Myanmar airport bust had given law enforcement its first real lead, and they moved fast. Operation Kungur was launched, a coalition of agencies from Australia, the US, China, Canada, Thailand, and Interpol. The mission? Dismantle the world's most sophisticated drug empire. As investigators connected the dots, a pattern emerged. Seemingly random busts in China, Japan, and New Zealand all traced back to one source. Meth floods in Australia weren't separate incidents. They were shipments from a single syndicate. And at the top, one name kept appearing, Tse Chi Lop. Then came the surveillance. In Australia, undercover officers listened in on traffickers scrambling to recover lost shipments. Panicked dealers begged their suppliers for replacements, terrified of the consequences. The calls were directly linked to Tse's inner circle. Not middlemen, not street-level criminals, his people. But Tse was always ahead of them. Private jets, offshore accounts, no digital footprint. Each time law enforcement moved in, he had already slipped away. It was careful, calculated evasion. Still, the walls were closing in. Tse's network was under pressure, his supply routes were being disrupted, and his top lieutenants were growing nervous. Then, in one moment of carelessness, Tse finally made a mistake. Even the most careful men can get too comfortable, and comfort leads to mistakes. With his network under pressure and law enforcement closing in, Tse should have disappeared completely, laid low, vanished. Instead, he did something that shocked investigators. He booked a commercial flight, not a private jet, not an offshore detour, a regular traceable commercial flight from Taiwan to Canada, with a layover in Amsterdam. For a man who had spent decades erasing his tracks, this was a baffling decision. Had he become overconfident? Did he underestimate how close the authorities really were? As soon as his name appeared on passenger manifests, Dutch authorities were alerted. The trap was set. January 22nd, 2021, Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam. Tse strolled through the terminal alone. As he approached his gate, a team of officers moved in. Quietly, efficiently, they surrounded him. There was no grand chase, no shootout. The billionaire drug lord, who had evaded capture for decades, was arrested like an ordinary passenger at the gate. His empire stretched across continents. Now, it ended with a pair of handcuffs in a quiet corner of Schiphol Airport. Tse fought extradition, but in December 2022, he was sent to Australia to face trial. The man who had ruled from the shadows was now sitting in a prison cell, awaiting justice. But even with his arrest, the company didn't crumble overnight. Like a hydra, cutting off one head doesn't kill the beast. The meth trade still thrives, and new players are stepping up to fill the void. Some investigators even wonder, did Tse make a mistake, or was he planning something bigger? For decades he stayed ahead of the law. Did he finally slip up, or did he know exactly what he was doing?